Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our Wheel and Anchor webinar, Gardens of England and France. Let's jump right in. I'll keep it brief. I know there's a few new people on our webinar this morning. What we're all about at Wheel and Anchor is we are a community of travelers. And when I put this organization together a few years back, I had the vision of a whole bunch of friends, people that have a great time, have a lot of laughs, all joining together on trips. And really that's how it started. Is we started with a bunch of people who had traveled with me time and time again. And the suggestion came, well, why don't you start a company and just bring more of us together. And that's kind of exactly what happened. And we have a great time, whether you're new to us or whether you've traveled with me in the past before. It's all about people having a lot of fun together. And besides that, of course, travel is really about becoming well-connected and well-traveled, of course. And well-traveled is all about having the opportunity to discover new cultures, new people, new food, new drink, new geographies and scenery, and at the same time getting to know people along the way, the people you're traveling with, the people that you meet along the way. Our guides, we've had some wonderful guides, and we will have lots more, and many that we've worked with before, and I know that friendships have arisen out of all of that. Which just makes the memories even more vivid that we have from traveling. So that's really what we're all about. So joining me today, as per usual, my name's Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor, as most of you know, and I'm joined by Joel Curry and Paula Zarnick, my colleagues who are in the background, but are monitoring the chat box. So if a message comes in or a question, then you'll get an answer from Paula as we go through the program this morning. And of course, our plan is to take you, people who are presumably garden enthusiasts, or you have some interest in these incredible displays of flowers, these horticultural exhibitions in Europe. So I'm going to take you on a journey today through the gardens of England and France, where we are headed in May of 2022. And Joel, seems to be a delay on the slides. There we go. And so looking at the map of where we're headed, the whole journey starts off in Paris. So that's an pretty easy place to get to from most major cities in Canada. And we'll first spend the first few days in Paris itself, visiting some sites that may be familiar to those of you who've been to Paris before. And then we'll spend some time down in the upper Loire Valley, staying in the city of Orléans, which may be less familiar to you, because for the average traveler, this part of France is not usually on people's radar screen. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll then go back to Paris, hop on the Eurostar train, which goes, of course, through the Channel Tunnel, and spend the latter portion of the trip in London, where we will, of course, visit the Chelsea Garden Show itself, and a couple of other terrific gardens in the London area. So that is the overview of our program. From a geographic standpoint, let's go through the day-by-day itinerary. And as I mentioned, of course, we start off in Paris, an easy place to get to, nonstop flights from Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, of course. Paris needs no introduction. And I know that many of our members have been to Paris before. And so you will have seen many of the amazing gardens that exist here. And, what I like about Paris is just sitting along in one of these cafes along the River Seine, on the left bank, or in the Latin Quarter, or in so many of these wonderful districts, having an Aperol perhaps, or a glass of wine, and just taking in the incredible architecture that is Paris, as well as all the passersby. It has a hectic feel to it, like a London, but it's different because, of course, the French are very much focused on their joie de vivre, and we can certainly see that in Paris. So the day that we arrive, there'll be time to just sort of relax, catch your breath, catch up on that jet lag. So we won't embark on too many things, but we're staying right on the ChampsElysees, the world famous ChampsElysees, which is of course bounded by one side by the Place de la Concorde, which is the starting point for one of our gardens the next morning, and on the other side, of course, by the Arc de Triomphe. So you are although the quite Champs-Élysées, for those of you who've been, is fairly long, but we can walk down and we will start off our first full day of the trip visiting these gardens, Tuileries. If you've been in Paris before, you've probably passed by them because, of course, you can see the building in the background there. That is a portion of the Louvre, the museum that Paris and France is most famous for. And on the other side, as I said, Place de Concorde. And of course, all of these gardens here date back to the era of the Medici, right? This famous family that founded basically the whole banking system in Europe. And so the thing that makes these gardens, the gardens themselves are of course lovely, but the history of the gardens is really what makes this particular special. And there's a whole bunch of components to it. For example, the orangerie. For those of you, again, who've traveled around Europe quite a bit, you've seen them. There's an orangerie that is usually part of the larger palaces and chateaus in Europe. And in this particular one, they have a standing exhibition from Claude Monet, in particular his water lily series. And so that's one of the things that we'll be able to take in. And as I say, you've probably passed through this garden before if you've been to Paris, but of course we're going to look at it from the perspective of its significance as a garden, as well as its historical perspective in the context of everything that has happened here over the years. Fran has pointed out that the Orangerie exhibit is absolutely spectacular. And so again, it might be something you haven't done or you haven't looked at it from this perspective in Paris before. So it's a great way to start the trip. We'll keep it easy. We'll probably just do a half day so that you have time to relax and soak in Paris, because let's face it, that's what being there is all about. The next day is when we're going to take in the first of some exhibitions, some special shows that we're going to see. And we're going to head up to the north, to the town of Chantilly, which is just outside of Paris, and to this incredible chateau, one of many, called Domaine de Chantilly, where they have the Journée des Plantes, right? The day of plants. And they equate it a little bit to like the Cannes Festival of, the Cannes Film Festival. This is like the Cannes Festival, but for florists. And so with this chateau as a backdrop, it's a festival that they've been running for about 30 years. And they have something like 200 exhibitors showing not just the plants, but also the way that they use plants to make perfumes, fragrances, for art, plants that you can eat. So again, it's a fascinating exhibition because it not only is lovely gardens, but it's also sort of the practical application of flowers. And as I say, that's just up in Chantilly. So it's a short drive from Paris itself. So we'll spend a good part of the day there. And then once again, have some time in the latter part of the afternoon to wander around the district, the Champs-Élysées district, where we'll be staying. So we'll have a nice couple of days in Paris before we then head down to the city of Orléans. As I said at the outset, not a lot of people visit this particular part of France, right? People often head to the south of France, Provence, of course, being particularly special, or they head out to Brittany and the Normandy beaches and so on. But this part, Orléans, which obviously is a name that's familiar, and it's where Orléans in Ottawa originated from, as well as the Ile d'Orléans in Quebec, and of course New Orleans all have the same city. But this is the original Orléans, and it was really put on the map in the days of Joan of Arc, who fought the British back in the 14th century. And so there's a lot of memorabilia dedicated to her. But at this time of the year, the reason we're going down to Orléans is because it is the starting point for the Route of the Irises, which is another exhibition that happens every year around this time. So we were able to string them all together. And the highlight here is this Parc Floral de la Source, which is adjacent to the university. and you have a chance to see sort of the interaction between where the urban part of the city and the countryside meet, and you see an incredible array of gardens. And so, on that note, we're going to spend a couple of days on this, visiting this Iris Festival, and going to some of the spots that we've picked out as some of the best places to see not only the irises, but the many other flowers that you've got. And so one of the first places that we'll be is at Champigny-sur-Veude, where they have this wonderful chateau called Chenonceau, which is one of the most beautiful in the Loire Valley. And the Loire Valley is renowned to have some of the most beautiful chateaus in France. So not only will we look at some beautiful flowers, but we'll also taste some of the wines that are classic from this area, like Chablis or Sauvignon Blanc. And in this town, for this festival, actually the people dress up in the period costume. So, you get the combination between the gardens and the chateau, and it's like a living history lesson. It's really, really quite fascinating. As I say, we'll spend a day in and around the Iris Festival in Orléans, and then we'll head out in a couple of different directions on the route des Iris, the route of the irises. And so we've done this in 2 different days. There's actually about 7 different parks, 7 different places that you could go. So you would really need days and days to take it all in. But we're picking, first of all, for example, yet another amazing chateau, in this case, Valence, which is known for its classic French gardens. They've got about 53 hectares of amazing gardens, and they have a very purist approach. You can sort of see a little bit from the picture, these neatly trimmed bushes and so on, and the pathways that have little pools and fountains. So it's the classic, French chateau with, with all these gardens interspersed, and they've even got deer and peacocks running around, just like they did in the days when these wealthy families built these chateaus. And as I say, it's really all about the irises, but there's so many other flowers in bloom at this time of the year. And the gardens of some of these chateaus are just so memorable. On the second day, the second part of our journey, we'll visit yet 2 more gardens, in fact. And just to explain a little bit about the route of irises itself, as I say, there are 7 parks and gardens, all of which have this designation they call Jardin Remarquable, which is, I always say, and they say it's kind of like the equivalent of an appellation d'origine contrôlée for wine, right? For the gardens, it's the same kind of a thing, and this is this Jardin Remarquable. Each of them has their own particular unique flavor to them, and here on this day we'll go to Apremont, and what I really like about this one is these wisteria tunnels that you can see here, and they also have a singing waterfall and flower beds with all these different types of flowers. But the place is best known for these wisteria tunnels. Just incredible stuff. So different. And again, part of the idea here is that a lot of these things are meant for locals as inspiration for their own gardens. And if you've seen private gardens, for those who are fortunate enough to have homes in the countryside in France, a lot of them take inspiration from these professional shows. So we can do the same. And although you're not really allowed to bring back, of course, any seeds or bulbs or anything into Canada, with some exceptions, but you can at least get inspired by some of the stuff that you get to see. So as I say, we'll have 3 amazing days down in the Orléans region, in the Upper Loire Valley, and then we'll hop aboard our coach, drive back to Paris. We'll have a little bit of time hanging around the Gare du Nord, the North train station in Paris, where we'll then jump on the Eurostar, which takes us on that 3-hour journey in a big hurry, 240 kilometers an hour through the Channel Tunnel, and a few hours later, by late afternoon, we'll arrive at St. Pancras Station, which in itself is an incredible architectural marvel. And we will do this part of the journey, the last part of the trip in London, staying down in the Kensington district. And Kensington is well known for, of course, gardens. The Kensington Gardens of the same name. That was the area where Princess Diana obviously lived in Kensington Palace. You have Harrods nearby. Really a very, very, how should we say, nice and well-to-do neighborhood of London. So here will be our base for the next few days, and then on the first day that we have in London will be the day that we have to visit the Chelsea Flower Show. Now, we may change the days a little bit. It partly depends on which day we get tickets for the Chelsea Flower Show. But talking a little bit about that, there is really no other comparable to the Chelsea Flower Show, certainly in Europe. I mean, one could perhaps argue that there are other flower shows in North America, but it is perhaps the most prestigious in the entire world, and it's quite a hoity-toity affair, right? The royal family is pretty much always makes a visit, some member of them, and the upper class of the UK visit because there's so many exhibits and so many things that people want to emulate in their own homes and so on and so forth. So we will spend the whole morning, and for those that wish, the whole day, right? We'll have a ticket that enables us to visit the whole entire show. I mean, you couldn't possibly visit it all. It's literally huge. It's on the grounds of the Chelsea Hospital, where it has been for over 100 years. And so in the afternoon, for those who have had enough of the show itself, and of course it's quite a busy affair. I mean, it's limited in attendance by tickets. That's why we have to organize this well in advance. And for those that wish, we will continue on to the Chelsea Psychic Garden, or sorry, Physic Garden, they call it, which is one of the oldest gardens in London and dates back to something like the 17th century, with 5,000 plants on display. And a lot of them are medicinal, edible. And here to really get to learn about, again, this practical application of plants. So it's as much about the herbs and all of the medicinal qualities that they have, in addition to, of course, you know, the beautiful flowers on display. So all in all, it would be a very full day, and undoubtedly one of the highlights of our trip. We will then leave most of the next day free to our own devices, because, you know, everybody needs a day in London to sort of hang out on their own. And there's lots to see and do. As I say, you could like literally just wander around the Kensington area. But we will, I'm sure, have some ideas up our sleeves. In fact, Todd, who's going to be hosting this program, will probably do a little flower arranging. He is a flower expert himself, and he will be hosting the trip for you. But that afternoon, we'll have to do afternoon tea in London, because as far as I'm concerned, it's one of my favorite things to do when I visit London, is to go for, you know, the elegant high tea. And I haven't decided exactly where we're going to go yet. In fact, we'll probably keep it as a bit of a surprise. Personally, I love tea at the Savoy Hotel, but they've got a few other places like Fortnum and Mason, or the Ritz Hotel. There's some wonderful places. And although our trips are usually pretty informal, pretty casual, but when you go for afternoon tea in London, you just have to sort of dress up a little bit. So this will be one of the occasions to get dolled up and go and have some exquisite afternoon tea. And believe me, once you've had afternoon tea, there's no more room for dinner. So that'll suffice us for the day. And then for our last full day on the program, we will head up, I should say down, I suppose, to the southwest of London in the direction of Guildford, in the Thames Valley, and hit the Royal Horticultural Society's Wisley Garden. And the Wisley Garden is the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones in the whole UK. It's almost 100 hectares, which is like 240 acres of gardens. So this one is super popular amongst locals, again, because of the sheer number of different displays. I mean, they've got a pavilion for, so many different kinds of flowers, indoor flowers, outdoor flowers. Again, plants, vegetables that you could plant and eat, and orchids, and so on and so on and so forth. So you couldn't possibly take it all in one day. So we'll spend part of the day getting some orientation from our local guide in terms of the breadth of this whole garden Wisley, but you'll have really a lot of the time on your own to just wander and be mesmerized by how incredible the Wisley Garden actually is. So it's quite an inspiring place, I have to say, and that'll be a fitting end to our trip. We'll have a nice farewell dinner, and that's it. So it's 12 days of intense gardens, but if you are somebody that really appreciates the fine art of gardening that they do in England and France, then this is absolutely the trip for you. And as I say, we'll be accompanied by Todd Kjaergaard, and he is one of Toronto's foremost event florists, so knows a ton about flowers and how to present them and so on and so forth. So he's also an awfully fun guy. So let me tell you a few of the details. Of course, you can find all of the specifics in our electronic brochure, which if you didn't get a copy already, we'll get one off to you, and it'll be on our website as usual. The program is going to be $67.80 Canadian based on double occupancy, a bit more for single occupancy. Of course, we're dealing with hotels in Paris and London, some of the more expensive cities in the world, but at the same time, it's quite a full program. As usual, inclusions wise, we're staying at some really very nice 4-star hotels, and we have local guides, people who are really experienced at some of these gardens. So you're not just getting an ordinary tourist guide, you're getting somebody that can speak about gardens and the whole experience of attending these shows, and all the other things that I just talked about. Typically 2 meals a day is how we normally run it on these kinds of programs. So it's going to be an amazing experience. Exclusions wise, of course, just your airfare and trip insurance is excluded, as well as some of those few other meals, so that you have a chance to go out and explore both Paris and London from a dining perspective on your own. But as I say, for the most part, a lot of the things that you need to spend money on are included in our program. Airfare wise, of course, we're all still waiting with bated breath what's going to happen with air routes once the industry gets back on its feet again. But at this point, we anticipate that particularly on these routes, Paris and London, which are obviously high volume routes, that airfare should stick to their historical average, which is around $1,000, regardless of where you're coming from in Canada. But yeah, we'll see. We're going to cross our fingers for that. If you have any questions about that, and I'm sure some questions will be coming in a second, yeah, I see some questions here already. If you have any other questions, specifics about the program, about booking in the program, then please do send us an email, and I'm delighted to talk to you about this program, as is Paula, of course. So please let me have your questions about this program, and I'm just going to open them up here. So I see one from someone, a minor point. Joan of Arc is 15th century, not 14th. I apologize for that information that I got wrong. There you go. You see, I need a little bit of a refreshing on my history lessons for French history. Then we have another question. What is the flower preparation session like? If you're talking about the one that Todd is going to do, basically, he's going to gather some of the different flowers, the blooms that we will have seen while we're in London, while at the Chelsea Flower Show, and basically show you the basic principles of flower arranging. And it's funny because flower arranging is one of those things I thought, oh, you just get a bouquet of flowers at your local florist and stick them in a vase kind of a thing. But there actually is a way of doing it that Yeah, and I can't explain it. Todd is the expert, but to really make them sort of stand out, and it's obviously a question of color and size and all the rest of it. But so it won't be long. It'll probably be about an hour long, and we'll either do it at a flower shop or perhaps in the hotel. We're just going to figure out the logistics of that, but that'll be a little bit fun. Then we have one other question about are we planning on running the tour in 2023? Yes, we're looking at this being a regular trip. So we want to run it every year in May for this show. I mean, obviously, as long as there's interest among our members. But I think that, what we've seen so far is a lot of people are interested in it. So it is currently the plan. Let's see how it goes for next year. But I would certainly like to run it every single year. I got to see one more question here. Will there be any wine tasting in France? Yes, I completely omitted the wine tasting. I think I mentioned on the one day that when we were in Orléans, we'll be tasting Sauvignon Blanc, as well as some of the other varietals that are endemic to the area. But we'll obviously have lots of opportunities. And I know that Todd enjoys his wines as well. So part of the fun is not just going to a formal wine tasting, because we actually don't have any vineyards per se in this program, because we're seeing predominantly gardens, but there are always places, little vinoteques that you can go to where you can taste wine. So we'll make sure that we allow plenty of time for that. And good, and I think that rounds out all of our questions. So we got this webinar done in good time today. Coming up next week is our webinar on Sicily, Malta, and the Aeolian Islands. Yet again, a trip that was scheduled to go this year. We had a great group, but sadly, of course, because of the COVID situation, we've had to put it off till May of next year. And I'm going to be talking all about this wonderful program. This is by a small ship. It's actually a yacht with a capacity of about 30 guests. And we'll be taking that from Naples, Italy, through the Aeolian Islands along the coast of Sicily, and then ending up in Malta for 5 days. That trip is going to be, we're going to be talking about that in April. I just see one more question here has come in from Anna. Our participants are required to have the COVID vaccine. It's actually not up to us as a tour company to require vaccinations, but I fully suspect, and they're already talking about it in the UK, about vaccine passports being required. So we'll just have to wait and see exactly what the requirements are closer to when the trip actually goes. But we've dabbled a little bit in this question, and I think there's still a lot of open questions about what requirements there are going to be for travel. Yeah, as soon as we know, we are certainly going to let you know and take whatever precautions we can to make sure that even when things return to normal, as it were, that we safeguard our members in the best way possible. Good. So once again, our information here on getting in touch with us in case you have any questions at all. Thank you for joining us. The Gardens of England and France is going to be a magnificent tour next year, and so I'm very excited about it. And I look forward to hearing your feedback and hopefully seeing you on board for this trip. And we'll catch up with you all again at our webinar next week or on one of our future webinars. So thank you again for joining us.